I've been following artificial intelligence for years, and for the first time, I'm actually starting to get worried. It has gotten both easier and more profitable to commit cyber crimes, specifically cyber hacks. And malicious actors don't even have their hands on the latest tools yet. And I think it's only gonna get worse. So I'm gonna break down everything that's going on. And if you enjoy these videos and me breaking down the latest in AI news, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel. And thank you to GenSpark for sponsoring this video. More on them later. Here is what already happened. This is from Google. First, the threat intelligence group at Google has detected the first known instance of a threat actor using AI-developed zero-day exploit in the wild. If you're not familiar with what that means, zero-day means it is a live exploit that nobody knows about yet. And somebody finds them. Typically, these zero-day exploits are worth a lot of money. You don't just use a zero-day exploit because as soon as you use it, everybody knows about it, then they patch it. So people, malicious groups, also state actors tend to pay a lot of money for these zero-day exploits. They hoard them and then they deploy them, usually multiple at the same time, to increase the amplification of the attack. And so now this is the first instance that the Google Threat Intelligence Group has detected an actual zero-day exploit discovered by AI. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, hey, just a few weeks ago, Mythos discovered dozens, didn't they? And yeah, I'm going to get to that in a moment. There's maybe an argument that Anthropic was right not to release the Mythos model, but again, we'll come back to that. So while the attackers planned a wide-scale strike, our proactive counter-discovery may have prevented that from happening. This finding is part of our new report on AI-powered threats. Now, I'm going to get back to that in a moment, but what I want you to keep in mind is that while a threat actor found a zero-day exploit using AI, Google also had a proactive counter discovery that may have prevented any actual attack from happening. And so again, keep that in mind. Keep that kind of attack and defense in mind, because that's going to be a big part of the story we're going to go over today. Then we have this big one. This is Shai Hulud, and it is basically taking over the internet right now. It is a worm that spreads and replicates, all based, I believe, on an NPM attack. Let's read it. Here, let's see. This is the original. So a new NPM supply chain attack uses a dead man's switch. The payload plants a watcher on your machine that nukes your home directory the second you revoke the GitHub token it stole from you. So wild, and it is spreading. The attack has now expanded well beyond Tanstack and Mistral. 373 malicious package version entries across 169 NPM package names, including big names, UiPath, Squawk, TallyUI, and bProduct. And it actually continues to spread. Shai Hulud crossed from NPM into PyPy and is still spreading. This is a severe worm. All right, so here's a post that I really like explaining what's going on. AI is playing a role in two ways, and this is why we're seeing the increase in severity, increase of volume of attacks. Far more code is being written, yes, and of course, there are many people who are quite negative about the vibe coding revolution that we're seeing, that people, whether they're expert engineers and know how to harness the power of AI coding, or they're just vibe coders and putting out a lot of code that they don't fully understand. There are a lot of naysayers on the vibe coding movement. So far more code is being written. Far more people are vibe coding without reviewing what their agents install. I'm guilty of this. I write so much code and I don't review most, if not any, of the lines of code. But also, my products are basically small and only help myself or a small group of people. Number two, attackers have woken up. We saw the first NPM worm last year. The recent Team PCP attacks have stolen a massive number of credentials that most teams haven't rotated yet. Yeah, and look, even Amjad, the CEO of Replit, said, is there a reason why supply chain attacks are seemingly on the rise? Is AI playing a role? The answer is yes. So the Team PCP stole a bunch of credentials, and combined with the power of AI to essentially increase the surface area of potential attacks, we're just going to see this increasing over time. And if you want to feel very secure with your AI agents, check out the sponsor of today's video. So y'all know I've been extremely deep in OpenClaw. I'm one of the most active users out there, but setting it up yourself, managing the infrastructure, and thinking about security is extremely difficult. And that's where GenSpark comes in. GenSpark just launched GenSpark Claw, built on the same OpenClaw framework, but they host everything for you on a dedicated cloud computer. It's your own isolated machine that runs 24/7. Installing similar tools can be quite the headache, but GenSpark Claw makes it easy. It's fully self-serve and can be set up in just about 5 minutes. GenSpark Claw is a great way to get OpenClaw-like agents without messing with any of the setup and having to install it on a separate machine. I simply open WhatsApp or Telegram and start talking to my agent immediately. Need a meeting summary? GenSpark Claw has it covered. I can also ask GenSpark's super agent to find me cheap flights or create an advanced workflow to automatically summarize a meeting agenda as soon as it hits my calendar. All of those same use cases, those sophisticated use cases that you're used to, you can do with GenSpark Claw. So go check out GenSpark, sign up, get free credits. I'm gonna drop a link down below. Thanks again to GenSpark. Now back to the video. And here's the thing. Malicious actors are just getting started. They don't even have the latest tools. And of course, Anthropic didn't release Mythos, but GPT 5.5 Cyber is out. But here's the thing, most likely they're not using the latest frontier models because these models actually have really good guardrails on them. And for the amount of tokens they would need to extract from the model in a malicious way, in an unintended or inappropriate way, the models are really good at detecting and preventing that. And so by the end of this video, you will understand why this is such a big deal and what you should be doing to protect yourself. So Vercel was hacked just a few weeks ago. This was a major attack, and the Vercel leadership team explicitly said artificial intelligence was almost certainly used in support of this attack. So here it is, Vercel April 2026 security incident. So we've identified a security incident that involved unauthorized access to certain internal Vercel systems. We are actively investigating and we have engaged incident response experts to help investigate and remediate. We have notified law enforcement and will update this page as the investigation progresses. Notifying law enforcement is kind of wild because I have to assume they are not nearly as technical as Vercel and certainly not as technical as the hackers, as the attackers. And so what are they going to do about it? I think maybe I'm wrong about this. It just seems like if you don't have the sophistication to actually detect and track down attackers, what are you possibly going to do as law enforcement? But the important part, this is Guillermo Rauch. He is the CEO of Vercel. A Vercel employee got compromised via the breach of an AI platform customer service called context.ai that he was using. The details are being fully investigated. But where it's really interesting is right here. We believe the attacking group to be highly sophisticated and, I strongly suspect, significantly accelerated by AI. They moved with surprising velocity and in-depth understanding of Vercel. So this is just the beginning. This is just one example. We are going to see more of these AI-assisted, AI-amplified attacks, cyber attacks. I actually think Vercel handled this really well. They communicated early and often and thoroughly, so I really appreciate how they handled it. This is no dig against them. I just wanted to point out that specifically, he said this is almost definitely AI accelerated. All right, and as I mentioned in the intro, Google has identified the first zero-day exploit that was discovered by artificial intelligence. And again, we're just going to see more of this. So let's read this a little bit. GTIG AI threat tracker, adversaries leverage AI for vulnerability exploitation, augmented operations, and initial access. The GTIG, the Google Threat Intelligence Group, has continued to track a maturing transition from nascent AI-enabled operations to the industrial scale application of generative models within adversarial workflows. This report, based on insights derived from Mandiant incident response engagements, Gemini, and GTIG's proactive research, highlights the dual nature of the current threat environment and where AI serves as both a sophisticated engine for adversary operations and a high-value target for attacks. This is the point. And this is something Jensen said. I'll pull up that video in a moment, but Basically, it's your AI versus my AI. That's what it all boils down to. Whoever has the best AI, the most powerful AI, will, in theory, hopefully in practice, be able to prevent attacks against weaker or by weaker artificial intelligence. It kind of makes sense, but there's actually quite a bit of surface area that is vulnerable to attacks, even if that is the case. And I'm going to talk about that later in the video. All right. So here are some of the things that they discovered: vulnerability discovery and exploit generation. GTIG has identified a threat actor using a zero-day exploit that we believe was developed with AI. Very, very scary. Artificial intelligence is the perfect tool to discover zero-day exploits, to discover any exploits in software. It can basically run 24 hours a day, has a much better understanding of code than humans ever could. And so it's just constantly churning through tokens, looking for vulnerabilities. A lot of code is public. A lot of code is open source, and that open source code is actually more vulnerable than closed source code, at least in the short run, right? Because with closed source code, you can't see it. It's a black box. You have to just figure out a way to enter that black box. Whereas open source code, you can literally just point your AI at it and say, find vulnerabilities. Now, if you're doing that and you're using a frontier model like GPT 5.5 Cyber, or if you're getting your hands on Mythos, they most likely have really strong guardrails where you cannot do that. They just prevent you from doing that. Obviously, no model is perfect. Jailbreaking is a thing, but these models have gotten so good that I really think doing sustained jailbreaking and then using that to actually attack systems is nearly impossible at this point. And so what are they actually using? And that's what we're going to talk about later in the video. If they're not using these frontier models, what are they using? How are they able to use AI at scale to perform cyber attacks? Now, it gets better. Back to the your AI versus my AI, good guys versus bad guys. The criminal threat actor planned to use it in a mass exploitation event, but our proactive counter discovery may have prevented its use. Very interesting. Threat actors associated with the People's Republic of China. And yes, we are definitely going to be talking about this. And the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have also demonstrated significant interest in capitalizing on AI for vulnerability discovery. We will be talking a little bit about state actors later in this video. And I actually think there's something interesting to point out here. I think it was Mark Andreessen who said it, but maybe not. Maybe he just reposted it. AI is not creating these vulnerabilities. I want to really be clear about that. AI is not creating them. They are there because software was written by humans, and humans are incapable of thinking perfectly about software. It is just not possible. And what is really happening is AI is just accelerating the discovery of these vulnerabilities. Okay, so don't think that, oh, AI bad because it's creating vulnerabilities. No, it is just accelerating them. These vulnerabilities would have been discovered. Maybe they are already discovered and somebody's hoarding these zero-day vulnerabilities. So I just really want to point that out and make it clear. It's not AI creating them. And in fact, oftentimes, and with Mythos and GPT 5.5 Cyber, they're often patching these vulnerabilities before they ever get attacked. Okay, so then they also found AI augmented development for defense evasion. AI-driven coding has accelerated the development of infrastructure suites and polymorphic malware by adversaries. As easy as it is for you to create that toy app that you spin up in just a few hours and it's fun and it solves one problem that you have, malicious actors can spin up hacking tools, an entire suite of software easily. These AI-enabled development cycles facilitate defense evasion by enabling the creation of obfuscation networks and the integration of AI-detected decoy logic in malware that we have linked to suspected Russian Nexus threat actors. It's not only getting easier to create software to hack systems, it's not only getting easier to scan large surface areas of systems for attack vectors, but it's also easier than ever to create decoys and proxies and just cover up your tracks as you go. It is bad and it is going to get worse. Here's another one. I remember reading about this a little while ago, but basically now they have autonomous malware operations. Just imagine, as easy as it is for you to type /goal in Codex and set a goal and have your agents running for hours and hours and hours, sometimes days, malicious actors can do the same thing. They can set up harnesses that allow these agents to run autonomously, basically forever. And if you factor in open source and you're running these models locally, and they're pretty darn good at this point, you can just imagine the cost to run them is effectively zero. It is the cost of whatever the computer that you bought to run it and the electricity. Adversaries also continue to leverage AI as a high-speed research assistant for attack lifecycle support. Here's another one. So we talked about in a previous video, distillation hacking. I also talked about in this video, it being very, very difficult to use frontier models for this hacking, but let's see. Threat actors now pursue anonymized premium tier access to models through professionalized middleware and automated registration pipelines to illicitly bypass usage limits. This infrastructure enables large-scale misuse of services while subsidizing operations through trial abuse and programmatic account cycling. Now, when you think about what Anthropic, our favorite company as of late, has been doing to prevent you from using OpenClaw or any other third-party harness, their detection systems are extremely sensitive. Right? So it would be surprising to me if attackers were getting their prompts through. Now, maybe there's a way to obfuscate the prompt so that the model actually does perform the attack or research towards an attack without directly thinking it is. I just don't know how prevalent that is. And here is the big one. This is what we're seeing right now with NPM, supply chain attacks. Adversaries like Team PCP have begun targeting AI environments and software dependencies as an initial access vector. These supply chain attacks result in multiple types of machine learning focused risks outlined in the Secure AI Framework taxonomy, namely insecure integrated component and rogue actions. Our analysis of forensic data associated with these attacks reveals threats actors attempting to pivot from compromised AI software to broader network environments for initial access and to engage in disruptive activities such as ransomware deployment and extortion. I believe the current attack, right? It's a worm. They get in and they basically install themselves in your coding software, in your AI coding software, and it just replicates itself. It's absolutely insane. So the velocity of these attacks, the volume of these attacks, the sophistication of these attacks are getting worse every single day. And so I think there's arguments on both sides. Is that good for open source models, or is that an argument against open source models? Is that an argument for Anthropic to release Mythos or against? And so there's a lot of angles to think of it through, and hopefully we'll talk about all of those. Oh, by the way, it's not just direct cyber attacks that is getting bolstered by artificial intelligence. We're also seeing phishing, like the most sophisticated phishing techniques, deep fakes. It is definitely scary out there. By the way, we had this guy on our live show a few months ago from Pindrop Security. He said it's only going to get worse. And Pindrop Security is developing AI to detect deepfakes and phishing attempts and all that. So again, it's like to the argument of, you know, good AI versus bad AI, strong AI versus slightly weaker AI. That's really what it's seemingly coming down to here. One tip, especially if you have older parents, create a code word or a code phrase with them. Right? It doesn't matter what it is, just create it. Make sure you both recognize it, because what can happen is, especially for somebody like me, who there's, 1,000 hours of video of me on the internet, somebody could easily deep fake me, call my parents, FaceTime my parents, and get them to give them money or say, I'm in jail, I need to be bailed out. And so there needs to be a passphrase. I highly recommend doing this. So there's an argument that as this stuff ramps up, we're going to see basically all software vulnerabilities get exposed, right? All of the software vulnerabilities are there. Again, I'm going to just say it again. It's there. It's not like they're being created by AI, but AI is allowing the acceleration of the discovery of these vulnerabilities. But then there's going to be this tipping point where all the vulnerabilities get patched, and then all new software, which is written by artificial intelligence, won't have vulnerabilities, or it'll be very few and very far between. Okay, so this is the post. Soon, every piece of software in the world will have their vulnerabilities exposed. And then shortly after, no software will have vulnerabilities. Okay, I truly believe this. And so I really do think that this is the likely future. I don't know a timeline. If I had to guess, I would say 2 to 3 years, we're going to see this. The rate of acceleration of software development supported by artificial intelligence, created by artificial intelligence, is insane. Just think about the last 6 months, how far we've come. And just think, there's a Mythos model, there's GPT 5.5 Cyber. These models are ready. Some of them, obviously GPT 5.5 Cyber is out in the wild being used and applied to patch vulnerabilities. Mythos being used and applied by a small group of people to patch vulnerabilities in software. So it's happening. Will artificial intelligence be able to find vulnerabilities forever? The assumption being there will be vulnerabilities in code forever. And I actually think that's pretty unlikely. There may be some very small vulnerabilities forever, but they're going to be low value. And I'm trying to think of counter arguments to that point. Augmentos, poisoned weights. Yeah, well, look, this again comes down to, okay, I'm just going to get into this topic because this is interesting. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to queue up Jensen was on Joe Rogan. He talked about this. Joe Rogan explicitly asked Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, how do you prevent cyber attacks? Like, what is your actual plan? And Jensen basically repeated the same thing over and over again. My AI versus your AI. My AI is going to be better. But how can that be? How do we ensure, or how do we know for sure, our being, we're the good guys, right? The non-malicious actors. How do we know our AI is going to be superior, is going to be stronger? There's actually an economic reason behind it. The strongest AI takes the most amount of data, takes the most amount of compute to run, because these are gigantic models, takes an insane amount of electricity, right? The best models in the world cannot be run on your home computer. They can't even be run on data centers created by people who don't have billions and billions and billions of dollars. So there's actually an economic disincentive to create malicious, world-class artificial intelligence. It's just not quite possible with one exception, and that is adversarial state actors. That is the only time the United States can create the best models in the world, because we have this thriving ecosystem throwing tons of money into data center build out, hiring the best researchers. We can actually sell the tokens. There's actually a business model there. And so we have the incentive, we have the ecosystem to build the best models in the world. Now think, before we get into the state actors part, think about a malicious rogue group, even a large group. They cannot get their hands on billions and billions and billions of dollars unless, of course, they're given it by another state actor, but they're just not able to spin up massive data centers and power those data centers without anybody else noticing. It is not possible. And so the argument is state actors who have the funds, the resources, everything, the knowledge to actually build the best models in the world will always have the strongest models. And if you're working with open source, or if you are just trying to load a model and you're just a malicious group, you're not going to be able to create a model stronger than what a state actor can create. And so with that, these are all kind of just building on these assumptions. With that, That means that the better AI is going to be able to be better at defense than the weaker AI is at attacking. This is something I do truly believe. All right. And then you can also think about all the software in the world. If you have a very important piece of software as a company and you first use, GPT 5.5 Cyber, or you use Mythos to harden that software, to find the vulnerabilities, then when that weaker AI comes along, even if GPT 5.5 Cyber missed a vulnerability, it is a better model, and thus the weaker model would have, in theory, also missed that vulnerability. If the better model didn't find it, the weaker model is not going to find it. They have less compute and a weaker model. How could they find something that the better, more compute model could not find? And actually, one more thing. I don't think there's going to be perfect software. And when I say perfect software, I mean with zero vulnerabilities. That is, nature is imperfect by definition. And so if all software is really just simulating nature, ultimately, it can't be perfect. By the way, this is all stuff just going on in my head. I don't know if it's actually that part is true or not, but it feels right. So here's the thing. As all of this is happening, the frontier labs are not just sitting still. They are not just allowing malicious actors to develop cyber weapons without doing anything. And in fact, they have been quite proactive. Mythos from Anthropic being the first one. Okay, and we're going to talk about the different approaches that these labs have had. So we already knew the labs were working on cyber defense models, but this is really kind of the first time we saw something substantial come out. And so this is the Mythos model by Anthropic, dropped April 7th. Basically, Anthropic is taking the approach that we've developed this incredible model, but we're not going to release it. It's too dangerous. And I'm going to show you why in a moment. But that's the approach they took. And it's very much in line with the culture and the posture that Anthropic has, right? They're developing everything behind closed doors, and you'll get it if we like it, or if we want you to have it, we'll give it to you. Obviously, I'm not a fan of that posture from Anthropic. I don't hate Anthropic, to be clear. I just don't like the kind of holier than thou approach or culture that they seem to have. So it was all part of this Project Glasswing. So Claude Mythos, Project Glasswing, I want to show you. They basically gave this incredibly powerful model, the first 10 trillion parameter model that we know of. They gave it to a handful of companies to go harden their systems first. They said, this model's too dangerous. We're not going to release it to the public, but we're going to give it to our friends, and they're going to harden their systems. And then maybe later we will release it to the general public. So they gave it to AWS, Apple, Broadcom, JP Morgan, Google, NVIDIA, Palo Alto Networks, etc. And this was a very good model. Now, kind of put aside what you think about Anthropic for a moment. It is a very good model. This was very much fear-based marketing. I'm just going to say that now, right? Because OpenAI released GPT 5.5 Cyber, which is just as good, and the world did not end overnight, okay? So very much fear-based marketing. Here are some things Mythos was able to do. Mythos Preview found a 27-year-old vulnerability in OpenBSD, okay? OpenBSD, with the reputation as one of the most security-hardened operating systems in the world, and is used to run firewalls and other critical infrastructure. This model has found real zero-day vulnerabilities. It also discovered a 16-year-old vulnerability in FFmpeg. Basically, FFmpeg runs all video on every computer and the internet. It is one of the most important and most used pieces of software in the world, and it discovered a vulnerability. And here is kind of what we're seeing more of with these cyber attacks increasing as of late. The model autonomously found and chained together several vulnerabilities in the Linux kernel. Why is this important? Now, we talked about zero-day vulnerabilities. They are very hard to find, at least they were. And state actors would pay millions of dollars to acquire them. And they wouldn't just acquire them and then use them. They would hold them for the right moment. Sometimes multiple zero-day exploits. They would just hold them, waiting for the right moment to attack, to use them. But now they're becoming easier to find. OpenAI released GPT 5.5 Cyber. Let's see, less than a week ago, scaling trusted access for cyber with GPT 5.5 and 5.5 Cyber. Trusted access in cyber is an identity and trust-based framework designed to help ensure enhanced cyber capabilities are being placed in the right hands. So OpenAI took a similar approach to Anthropic. They're not just releasing the model widely for everybody, as far as I know, but they are letting people use it in a much more aggressive way. And so their kind of entire posture as compared to Anthropic is release early, release often, and iterative development is the way to solve a lot of these, both alignment issues, the cybersecurity issues. Just release it early and often. For Claude Mythos 83.1 and CyberGym 5.5 Cyber 81.9. So just a couple points behind Mythos. But again, Mythos and Anthropic took this entire fear-based marketing approach. We can't release the model, it's too powerful. OpenAI, on the other hand, said, let's go. We also have this Google team that is doing something very similar, although I don't know if they're developing cyber models, although I assume they are. This came out yesterday. OpenAI introducing Daybreak, frontier AI for cyber defenders. Daybreak brings together the most capable OpenAI models, codecs, and our security partners to accelerate cyber defense and continuously secure software. A step toward a future where security teams can move at the speed defense demands. So find and fix vulnerabilities earlier with Daybreak, cut through the security backlog with Daybreak, automate security detection, validation, and response with Daybreak. All right, so I want to talk about my main argument, which is bigger model wins. Good guys win because they have bigger models. They have the economics behind them to actually invest, build out these AI data centers, actually develop, cook the models, RL the models, have the best researchers to find the latest advances in the models. And so as a rogue team, a malicious team, a small group, you're never going to have the resources as a country, I should say. Right? And so like better model means that model is going to be able to defend against weaker model, and hopefully bigger country, more resources will have the best model. Okay. So just keep all of these points in mind as I continue. But there's actually something else going on. The ROI of attacking smaller groups, less sophisticated groups, becomes much better. The ROI. We've talked a lot about how the economics of artificial intelligence make it so that countries will most likely have the best models. The actual non-malicious actors will have the best models because they have the most resources. But in this interim period, it is actually going to be extremely viable as an attacker, as a malicious actor, to make a lot of money and to harm a lot of people simply because the economics of attacking become more favorable for the long tail. And I'm going to explain what that means. So what we're seeing here is basically we have this nice line like so, where, you know, the most difficult attacks happen towards this side of the graph, right? So let's say right here is the cutoff. The more difficult and the more sophisticated attack is, the likely chance it'll be of higher value. And the problem is when you start getting to lower difficulty and less sophistication, the value of those attacks also decreases. And it doesn't really make sense. Let's say you find a 0-day exploit, or even, you know, something less frontier than that. If you're going to attack somebody whose maximum value is, you know, $100,000 or even less than that, let's say $10,000, an individual, just some person who, you know, they work and they just have a knowledge work job. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to spend a lot of time trying to attack that person because the total value of the attack is quite low, right? That's why typically attackers go for big companies, but actually AI kind of changes the equation. So like before, this was all green. Okay, this is profitability of attack. And this was right here. It didn't really make sense. The ROI of investing in an attack was not there. But now with AI, because you're able to find vulnerabilities more easily, you're able to develop AI hacking software suites more easily. You're able to increase the surface area of attacks. You're able to perform attacks in parallel at a greater rate than you ever can. All of a sudden, this part of the graph also becomes profitable, right? So it's not as difficult, but it is actually ROI positive to start attacking this kind of long tail. But my overall point is that we're going to see a larger number of attacks on smaller teams, smaller individuals, less overall value of an attack, but they're able to do so many more of them that the ROI is definitely there. Okay. You're just able to do so many more of these attacks. Okay. And so I know I'm usually a big proponent of open source, but in this instance, this might be the counter argument to open source artificial intelligence. To be clear, I still am very much a proponent, but I do want to talk realistically again about the counter arguments for open source artificial intelligence. And so if you think about it, open source AI does give malicious actors, malicious teams, the ability to write a lot of software, a lot of malicious software, very inexpensively. And so although those models aren't quite as good as the big models, the frontier models, and so whoever is using the frontier model will be able to defend against those open source models, many people in the economy are not doing either. They don't have any artificial intelligence scanning their software or hardening their computers. And so all of a sudden we have this long tail, as I just showed, of people who, although the total attack value is less, the ROI is very much there and powered by open source. Because if it's open source, any guardrails that it did have can be removed quite easily. And in fact, they can be fine-tuned and RL'd into being really good at cyber attacking. But again, bigger model, better at defending than smaller model is at attacking. And actually, this is the same exact argument that I've made in the past. Gosh, there was this video I made a while ago where I was basically talking about the ROI of AI and how there were a lot of people who had counter arguments saying there is not infinite problems in the world. And thus AI has a cap on the total value that it can have. And I disagreed. And I especially thought not only are new problems going to be created, but also there's an entire long tail of problems that can be solved with software and be solved profitably, because it's becoming cheaper to create software to solve problems for that long tail where the total value of the problem being solved is less, but the cost of solving the problem is even lower. Okay, now let's get to the last point. We talked about, our AI being better, defending us against malicious actors' AI. Now, I have lately talked about the US versus China. And China is our adversary. Okay, this is just a fact. A lot of people kind of called me out and said, well, that's the old human way of thinking. And yeah, well, guess what? We're humans. They are our adversaries. That doesn't mean, they're bad, we're good. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. That's an entirely separate argument. But the point is, we have two competing countries. Okay? And so while small malicious teams won't be able to develop powerful cyber weapons as powerful as the US or China can develop defensive AI suites of software or just AI models in general, they can develop it against each other. And that definitely makes me nervous. Okay, because if you think about it from the country, from the state level, you have everything. You either whatever country you're from, you have all the ingredients necessary to do it. You have compute. You have funds to actually fund the research. You have the researchers. You can build out data centers. You have energy, right? And so when I said, and I kind of want to go back to this, I specifically said I have like no ill will towards China, but I do hope the US wins the AI race. Okay. There's a reason I said that. And the reason is because this is just another argument for these like cyber attack and cyber defense situations that are playing out right now. I am less concerned with a rogue team, a rogue group getting an AI model and being able to attack and actually have a large value, large scale attack on another country like the United States. But on the other hand, if one of our adversaries has a model that is incredibly good as ours, they can and probably will use that as leverage for geopolitical power. That is the way of the world. And if you don't think that's the way of the world, you're probably being naive. So that's it for today. Once again, thank you to GenSpark for sponsoring this video. I'm going to drop their link down below. Please go check them out. It helps us. And also, it's a great product. So go check it out. Also, if you enjoyed this video about AI and security, one of my favorite videos that I made was challenging the best prompt hacker on the planet to break into my system. And you can find that right here.